Third time's the charm. Hey, how you doing? I'm Van. Welcome back to the only channel on YouTube that knows that thing about the mitochondria. You know, the thing. Yeah, you got it, you know. It has been a chore to record this video, man. Like, I have had nothing but technical issues. The thing about, you know the thing. And user error. So this is attempt number 3 at recording this one. RIP my original, tripod and everything. I feel bad for him. He died. I give him a good send-off whenever I tried to record this video the second time. But, you know, at this point, I'm just mad. But way back in the late 19th century, there were these things called demo discs. A demo disc was a disc that had demos on it. I know, groundbreaking stuff, truly tremendous. These demo discs were generally given away as promotional items, often with other things, such as a Pizza Hut deal, for instance. I bring that one up specifically because it's the one that I had. It's the one that I remember having. Guys! It's the one that I remember having, and it's the one that had the demo to Final Fantasy VIII on it. As it turns out, that's actually how I remembered that it existed. I started playing Final Fantasy VIII, and it just occurred to me that I was remembering it looking very different. Not enough to really say that it was a nostalgia filter. The specific demo disc that I'm going to be talking about right now is the Squaresoft 98 Collector CD Volume 2 Final Fantasy VIII demo. It's a mouthful. I mean, makes sense. It was given away at Pizza Hut. But yes, it had the Final Fantasy VIII demo on it. But it also had something else. It had something that sat in the back of my memory for a very, very long time, and I only really discovered what it was relatively recently. But I didn't have the opportunity to play through it until very recently. Of course, the game we're talking about is Parasite Eve. Parasite Eve was an M-rated game released by Squaresoft in the holiday season of 1998. Based on a Japanese novel of the same name released in 1995, the game actually served as a sequel. I didn't know that before I started researching this video, so that was interesting to me. Now that I know that, the gaps in what the story tells you make a little more sense. For some reason, they assume that because I'm playing a video game, I also read. Fucking, what am I, a nerd? Parasite Eve stood out for a lot of reasons. Number one, and I mentioned it at the top, but it was rated M, for mature. That was not something that Square Enix generally did, and when they did, they usually did a pretty mediocre job. This looked well done. It looked crafted to be scary and gruesome and nasty and horrible, and a very good option for an M-rated game. The setting also stood out a bit, being real-world New York around Christmas time of all reasons. Yes, this is a Christmas game. Happy holidays. Here's Parasite Eve. Everyone dies. And it's also horror, which is not something Square is known for. Strikingly, it's done well, with multiple different types of horror, both from the setting to the atmosphere to the ever-prevalent body horror and body terror. The game was actually built with a modified version of the same engine that was used to make Final Fantasy VII, which is pretty obvious when you really sit down and look at it. Really, the similarities between Final Fantasy VIII and Parasite Eve are the most striking, but Parasite Eve clearly served as a stepping stone between 7 and 8. Also, fun fact, Tetsuya Nomura helped design the main character, Aya. He didn't do anything else as far as I can tell. I guess he was just known for character designs at this time. He hadn't become a mad scientist and created Kingdom Hearts 3 yet, obviously. Fucking duh. But if you know anything about Parasite Eve, you probably know that there are a few memes about the plot. The plot's a little ridiculous, and we're gonna cover it too. We're gonna talk about all the things, don't worry. As a matter of fact, we're gonna talk about 5 things, technically 6 because I cheated on one of them, but whatever, it's my video, fuck you. But I want to make it clear that the trailer in that demo is what inspired this video. I went back and watched it as an adult, and it still captured the same feelings that I had whenever I was a kid. And let me tell you, for the most part, it really lived up to those expectations, which I didn't anticipate at all. So please make sure you subscribe to this video, please make sure you like it, engage in some way, I don't really care how, as long as my numbers go up. It's the only source of my serotonin right now. Go watch my other stuff, we're We're buds. So let's talk about the worst thing first.
Wow.
I know. I'm cheating immediately, straight out the gate, but this is the only one that I'm doing it on. Relax. The story and the setting feel so intertwined in this game, and that's a good thing. That's a good feeling in an RPG, but they feel so intertwined in this game that it feels negligent to separate them. If I were to divorce these two concepts from each other for the sake of extra categories, I feel like I couldn't do each individual one justice. So I mentioned the mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell, and that is essentially the plot, in a nutshell. But the story essentially states that the mitochondria, the little cellular organelle that lives within the cell of every living thing, is its own independently evolved, conscious, sentient organism that wants to take over the world or something. I don't really know. It's kind of dumb. And conceptually, I understand that this comes from the novel, and maybe something was lost in the translation to make it make more sense than it does, but to say that the mitochondria is a conscious thing, it feels odd to me. I know it's weird. I know the mitochondria is very weird, and it's got different things about it. That's kind of a little much, I think. That's the whole problem with the plot. The concept of the mitochondria doing this, the concept of the plot, its conception is silly. And I understand that it's well done, all things considered. It's interesting, it's very yucky, and very visceral. But because the concept is so silly, whenever the characters start talking about it, you just can't help but think of them as cartoon characters. Now, the setting intertwines with this because it is such a grounded, real feeling New York City when you really get down to it. You go to real places, the backdrops are well detailed, and the maps look interesting, unique, like it feels like New York, sort of New York. Drink water, kids. You're like 70% this. And also, too, in retrospect, this game's big thing that the mitochondria does to kill people is burst them into flame. It causes them to experience spontaneous human combustion, which was just people being dry. That's it, dry and cigarettes. That's all you need. Despite how well done the rest of the storytelling is, anytime the characters open their mouths, it comes off kind of like a joke, like a really goofy joke. Now, to say the characters are the second worst thing about an RPG really makes that RPG sound bad, when you also state that the story is not very good. But hear me out, because it doesn't mean these characters are bad. The leap in quality from 5 to 4 is tremendous. There are 3 main characters in the story of Parasite Eve. The main character, Aya, her partner, Daniel, and the main villain, Melissa, or otherwise known as Eve. These characters take up a solid 70 to 80% of the story in the game, with everything happening to them. You don't even have a party that travels with you. You're just Aya running around doing your stuff, giving you time to resonate with this one character as opposed to trying to relate to multitudes of wacky, goofy little guys. They have real-world issues, they have real-world problems, and things that people can relate to. Daniel is in the midst of a custody battle for his son, and his son is also a pretty pivotal part of this game as well, but the son is annoying at best. Eve, or Melissa really, in particular, is a tragic villain, and you can find out a lot of this information really early on in the game with journal entries detailing her descent into becoming Eve, but the mystery of why she became Eve is left a little ambiguous for a while. Ambiguous, that's the word I tried to say. Not ambiguous. That's when you think you know what it is, but then you get stuck going, the weakness in the characters department really falls on the side characters, because they're forgettable. There's not really one side character that I could name to you, because they're just briefly introduced, they do their thing, and then they leave. But the tight focus on 3 characters versus a whole menagerie really does help bring them out. Going back to that trailer from the demo disc, the music on that trailer was stellar. But why was it so good? What about that song was so good? Why did that tickle my brain? This is tickling my brain. Why did it tickle my brain in a way that why did it tickle my brain in a way that other types of music for video games didn't? And I think I know what it was. The music, despite being high energy, despite being rapid and frantic and scary, and fuck out of here in a lot of ways. The soundtrack was sad. There's an overwhelming feeling of background sadness throughout the entire OST. The piano is such a good instrument to convey sadness, and it's used pretty heavily. There are some that are just electronic beats, the battle theme being like synth or some kind of keyboard progression that's not piano, but it still has kind of the same vibe and feeling to it. But that sadness is really what makes it stick out. When you're watching these horrible beasts rise from the bodies of normal everyday animals and it sounds sad, there's a dissonance in your brain that causes it to stick that much better. And whoever came up with that decision, whoever decided that that was going to be the case, really should get a gold star. The game could really benefit from more voice acting, because the only real voice acting, quote-unquote, that we get, other than the song itself, is just like a shrill aria that could be really more a just sound effect. Could be improved for voice acting in a remake. Hit me up, Squeenix. Like, I'll let you buy the idea to use your own game for a remake. I love the gameplay to this game, man. I didn't expect this at all going into it. I anticipated turn-based combat, or alternatively, no traditional RPG combat at all. Maybe something closer to Resident Evil, tank controls, something like that. I wouldn't have played it if that was the case. I fucking hate tank controls, but it doesn't have that. There is an actual combat system, and the enemies that you battle you can see before you enter combat. The combat system in the game is a variant of Vagrant Story's combat of all things. And there's a variety of weapons, surprisingly too, with a lot of melee options and ranged options. Magic, in a sense, becomes available as you progress through the game. It's a well thought out and well crafted system. You can move around freely during combat, giving you opportunities to avoid enemy attacks, which you will need to do if you are playing on any difficulty other than easy. These enemies hit hard. You are expected to dodge around and avoid the majority of the damage. If you take everything that you're going to see, you will not beat this game. You can still become really, really absurdly powerful by the end of this game, but they will chip away at your health to the point that by the time that you get to the boss, you will die over and over again. I know this because it happened to me. Trust me. It's not a bad thing. It is what it is. Like, I messed up and the game was not going to forgive me for it. I understand. I got past it eventually by getting really good at dodging. It's very Dark Souls in a way. You have to learn the enemy's patterns and learn to avoid them in order to do the best you can. The atmosphere of Parasite Eve is one of the best that I've ever experienced. If I could describe it in two adjectives, they would be grotesque and eerie. Nothing about the city feels right. That permeates through the soundtrack. It permeates through the character design, through some of the dialogue, through the events that happen. So much crazy weirdness occurs, and a lot of times it is just crazy JRPG stuff, set-piece boss fights or set-piece enemies. But for the most part, you get the feeling that this is supposed to be New York. And New York is wrong here. There's no people, there's no noise happening. The snow has blanketed New York City as well, giving it an even stiller feeling, Ben Stiller feeling. The melancholy of the soundtrack pervades in every aspect too, seeping in even deeper and deeper into the setting itself, and creating a wonderful atmosphere. It's so heavy. Heavy is a phenomenal way to describe it. Everything feels like it has weight. Characters die. Bad things happen. Awful shit occurs, and there are consequences that happen to the characters through the story. It's not that they get off scot-free by any stretch of the imagination. It's a good game. It's a great game. But that was Parasite Eve, the game that in my mind is just going to be the weird demo disc from Pizza Hut game for the rest of my life. Even though I didn't even play it on that disc. If I were to give it a ranking right now, if I were to give it a score based on how I feel at this moment, it would be in the range of a 9 or so. It only doesn't get the 10 because the plot is steeped in that very silly feeling thanks to the concept of the plot in general. But the pacing, the writing, the setting, the atmosphere, the music, everything else really just makes up for it in spades. Parasite Eve 2 was released in 1999, and I plan on playing it probably soon. It apparently got slightly more mixed reviews from critics than Parasite Eve 1, but I tend to not trust like reviews from a long time ago. They tend to be time biased, I guess. Good things age better with time whenever we are more competent as a gaming culture. If it's good, but it was a little confusing back then, they would rip the shit out of it. But now, if it's good and a little confusing, it's complimented even more. Hopefully Parasite Eve gets a remake at some point. They're going through the backlog and doing things, and I feel like this would be a good assignment for a B team. A competent B team with a lot to prove as well. That way they could do everything justice. They could even maybe lease out the RE engine to do it. That way they wouldn't have to develop their own in-house engine. But anyway, yeah, that's all I got. I just wanted to ramble about this for a little bit. I've got one more PlayStation Classic nostalgia dump kind of game I want to talk about, and then I'm going to be moving on to something completely unrelated, because I went down an internet rabbit hole earlier, and let me tell you, I got brain blasted, man. Like, it was entirely unexpected, and I am very happy to say that I'm excited for that series whenever it begins. So subscribe if you would like to see whatever it's going to be. It's very, very nerdy and very, very old. So, but we're gonna get past. We got one more before that. Let's focus on what's in front of us. But yeah, y'all have a great rest of your night.